Jarid trying to get in tight quickly, but it ends up being Josh Griffin on top here, Jeremy.
Got in and got the hips through on the throw, so good work by Griffin. And now you mentioned that he's got that great ground game, but he appeared to just let Jarid Bussemakers up, so perhaps maybe thinking that it's better to keep this fight standing.
Well, Jarid Bussemakers has been competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments for 15 years, and Josh told me that he respects that. He knows that he'll be in tough if he gets to the ground, and as a result is looking to keep this fight striking. Nevertheless, for the second time now, they find themselves on the ground, and for the second time, it's Josh Griffin on top.
Watch with his hand underneath the leg. He's going to link his hands together and yank his leg over top to be able to put some pressure on. But Josh Griffin sensing that, lifting him up, attempting for the slam, and Jarid Bussemakers wisely letting go.
Now Josh Griffin looking for a submission on the far side. Bussemakers pulling his arm back. Griffin continuing to work from the top.
And he can take away the jiu-jitsu of Jarid Bussemakers by getting into side control. There's very few submissions from side control on the bottom that you can land effectively. All other positions have some 5 or 6 submissions, and I think that that's what Josh Griffin is really doing, is working to try and get into that side control.
So his coach is calling for him to stand up. A nice trip takedown there from Bussemakers as Griffin was trying to separate. Bussemakers grabbed his leg and took his momentum away and wound up on top.
Well, and as you step up, if you put all your weight on one leg, a guy like Jarid Bussemakers is going to catch you, and catch him he did, and now a top position. Very dangerous spot here for Josh Griffin on the ground.
So Bussemakers lands a couple of shots, but Griffin with some nice defense, now trying to wrap his arm up and eating some hammer fists as a result.
The other thing that's not necessarily known is if you're an excellent jiu-jitsu practitioner like Jarid Bussemakers is, you know what's going to happen when you feel those submissions coming. So when Josh Griffin tried that submission, he knew where his advantage was going to come and where he was going to have an opportunity to strike, because he knows the position he's going to end up in. And you saw it there on that attempt at the omoplata by Josh Griffin.
So again, some nice damage being done on the top here from Jarid Bussemakers after securing the top position via a trip about a minute ago, and now he's looking for a submission of his own, cranking Griffin's arm out, and the referee looking for that other hand of Griffin to see if there's a tap. Bussemakers lets it go temporarily, and Griffin able to squirm out from underneath.
Good work here by Josh Griffin getting away from that dangerous position. The danger not necessarily from the attempt at the Americana, but from the fact that from a top position, Jarid Bussemakers was trying to slip in a triangle. He was waiting for Josh Griffin to sit up, and Josh Griffin wisely did not take the bait.
Minute and a half to go here in round number 1 of 3 potential rounds. Nice elbow there, measured and landed from Jarid Bussemakers. Now trying to use some ground and pound on top, trying to land punches. Griffin doing a good job of defending here.
Well, on the mount from here, you see Jarid Bussemakers not really throwing all he has into these strikes. What he's trying to do is wait for Josh Griffin to stop the strike by reaching his arm up, which leaves it open for moves such as this one where he's isolating an arm.
Trying to isolate the arm from side control is Bussemakers. Griffin again scooting back into the mount, or rather into the guard. And now trying to isolate an arm. Josh Griffin looking for the armbar. Bussemakers just pulls out and passes short term. Griffin was looking for the heel hook there.
And this is a jiu-jitsu clinic going on right now by both of these guys, showing offense and defense here in round 1 of our co-main event of the evening.
A mount position here for Bussemakers. Short time left in round number 1. Lands a couple of elbows, starts to drop some punches, looking to finish here in the final seconds, but cannot get the decision before the end of the round as they meet in the center of the cage. And again, a nice switch kick there from Griffin, throwing 4 kicks at his head in a row, and a spinning back fist in return from Bussemakers. Some highlight potential here in round number 2.
One good combination from Josh Griffin, and again, the first kick is the excellent one because he comes up and stops short and then flicks out. That's that karate background that we were talking about.
So Griffin now on top of Bussemakers, trying to make work after the first round, and there's a lot of blood.
Josh Griffin is bleeding. We can't necessarily see from where, but there is a ton of blood pouring from the face of Josh Griffin.
Yeah, right now you can see it just dripping off the face of Josh Griffin. Not sure where that came from in the exchange. It is his nose, though, that is bleeding like that. And Bussemakers going to try and make him pay and make him defend that. And Josh Griffin pushing his way through it and is on top again. Now in a mount. We'll see if he can posture up. This is probably the best position Josh Griffin has had. We'll see if he can posture up and use those fists that he's known for in the karate world.
Well, and this is one of those things, and it's very weird to say, but the blood is actually to the advantage of Josh Griffin because what it does is it mixes with the sweat and it makes you more slippery. So it's more difficult to get the submissions, which is the game of Jarid Bussemakers. So it's one of those things that it seems so strange to say that perhaps Josh Griffin's nose bleeding the way it is to his advantage, but it's only to his advantage when he's on top. As soon as he's on the bottom, that blood is now running back into your throat as opposed to on the mat.
Bussemakers with a nice reversal to get on top, and now Josh Griffin defending from the bottom. And Bussemakers trying to find a spot, very much so raising his fist like he was going to throw it down, but then just steps into the position. Again, trying to better his spot, but right now just landing punches to the midsection. And you could almost see what the coaches were talking about there in between rounds, Jeremy. Those punches were not coming with any kind of authority. Jarid Bussemakers might be a little gassed out here.
Well, and again, he has been spending most of his time over the last 4.5 years doing coaching, so it takes a while to get that full MMA cardio system back into play, whereas Josh Griffin has been very busy over the last 2 years and knows what it's like to fight in these situations.
So Bussemakers again on top. Griffin trying to scoot out from underneath and is able to do so. Looking for a leg here, maybe trying to secure a heel submission. We've seen a couple of those in Hard Knocks recently on behalf of Sergey Yuskevich. But Bussemakers gets out of that, and again trying to just kind of a somewhat unorthodox way to get back into the top position there, Jeremy. Just kind of lied sideways, and Josh Griffin squirted underneath to secure the guard.
Well, a guard for a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, and again, both these guys have excellent jiu-jitsu. The guard is a good place to work from, and again, if your opponent's tired, he's not going to be really raining down any punches on you. He's going to be trying to conserve his energy, so maybe it's an opportunity for you to work if you don't feel like you can get back up and get into a standing position.
So again, Bussemakers trying to get into a better position, does find himself now inside control. Griffin continuing to work from the bottom. Bussemakers on top. Now Griffin reverses that and gets back on top himself.
Working his position first. He had an opportunity to drop a few elbows, but that would have cost him the position that he's ended up in. He worked to make sure he got the position first, and that is a good Kimura to use to sweep, but the danger is still there. Now Josh Griffin able to get out of it, but an excellent sweep off the Kimura by Jarid Bussemakers.
Again, high-level jiu-jitsu between these two fighters as we continue to roll around on the ground and continue to try and find an advantage. And now Bussemakers over top of Griffin, telling him to get up and not taking any part of it, and eventually landing a shot with Jarid Bussemakers. Maybe a triangle now. Josh Griffin trying to secure it in. He's got to get that other foot behind the knee. There it is. And we'll see if he can pull the head down and secure the submission. Just 14 seconds left in the round. And Josh Griffin trying desperately to finish this off with a triangle. He may not have enough time before the bell goes, though, as he secures in the choke, Jimmy. That's not a bad attempt at the triangle here. And Griffin trying to get it done, but the bell goes, and Bussemakers rolls off. between the second and third. We'll see if he's got the stamina here. We have seen Josh Griffin go 3 5-minute rounds on a couple of occasions here in the Hard Knocks cage earlier in his career. A nice takedown from Bussemakers.
Excellent takedown from Bussemakers, but I'm surprised that Griffin was so lead-footed, and perhaps he's feeling the effects of such a difficult fight here, because that's a takedown that normally Josh Griffin would be able to step out of, or perhaps this is part of his game and he wants to go down to the ground. The problem is he's on the bottom, which is not where he wants to be.
So again, looks like he might be trying for the triangle, now trying to pop out. Trying to set that up, the knee on the shoulder, creating some distance between himself and his opponent from Josh Griffin. Maybe trying to find a butterfly guard here, Jeremy.
We watched in the second round when Bussemakers got up high with that butterfly guard that Josh Griffin likes to use. He actually pushed his opponent up and was able to reverse out of it. So it's something perhaps, like you said, that he's using, but good work by Bussemakers there, taking that foot out of his hip and taking away the power base, and he's going to be able to strike from here. And there's very few muscles that allows that leg to come back to that position. It's a muscle that does not get worked on an everyday basis, and you kind of have to weasel out of there like Josh Griffin just did.
So Bussemakers on top. Bit of an ear slam there from Josh Griffin.
They hurt. Pop an eardrum and the fight is over.
And you can see Jarrett now covering up to prevent that from happening. Again, Josh Griffin very busy from the bottom, but we've seen this before in the Hard Knocks Fighting Championship, Jeremy, where a guy has submission attempt from the bottom and still loses the fight because he was on the bottom.
Well, he does desperately need to get out of here, and Jarid Bussemakers is going to do everything he can to keep Josh Griffin down, and he's landing these palms to the ears. I like to call him the Andre the Giant from The Princess Bride when he used that move to get everybody down, but again, lots of pressure being put forward and down pressure by Jarid Bussemakers because he does not want the official to call this back standing.
So 2.5 minutes gone in round number 3, the third and deciding round of this Hard Knocks fight, as Bussemakers on top of Griffin, where he has been for a good portion of the fight, Jeremy, but again, I would argue that this is it has been a lot of Griffin's fight from the bottom, doing more of the damage from those positions, securing a couple submission attempts and doing more damage from the bottom.
A can opener attempt here by Jarid Bussemakers, and again on top. And again, it surprises me that with these opportunities to get away from this position that Josh Griffin has not been able to escape. He has had opportunities and now has both the feet on the hips, and he's looking to push away, perhaps isolate an arm, but just a swarm here by Jarid Bussemakers keeping him on the ground.
So again, Bussemakers on top, Griffin on the bottom. Griffin trying to find a way out. Bussemakers trying to get a position here where he can continue to do some damage. So far, though, unable to really secure any damage from the top when he's been on top is Jarid Bussemakers. But Josh Griffin as well can't be on the bottom for the entirety of a third round and expect to win the fight.
Well, there's the blood flowing again. I don't know if it's from the knee or from the eye.
That's from the cheek. He busted him wide open with one of those elbows. And Josh Griffin is in trouble here with 1.5 minutes to go. Jarid Bussemakers starting to land punches from the top and blood streaming from the face of Josh Griffin. Bussemakers on top, trying to find a finish here. Griffin holding him down, preventing the damage, trying to keep it from doing. But, I mean, it's right in front of us here, Jeremy, and that is an ugly cut on the face of Josh Griffin.
Well, and again, it won't surprise me if they get back to neutral if the referee calls the doctor, and just because of the location of that cut, it is right actually under the eye. So at least that's some good news here, that it's under the eye. But again, Jarid Bussemakers from the top now looking to work to an arm bar, using that arm bar to land a big shot. And again, tons of blood coming from the face of Josh Griffin.
Yeah, if there was any question about damage from the top, Jarid Bussemakers has answered it here in round number 3. 20 seconds to go. Bussemakers on top of Griffin and continuing to do damage, continuing to land punches. Griffin trying to scramble out, and big elbows now coming from Bussemakers. He's landing punches, and with 5 seconds to go, he's going to take this flurry out. A huge elbow now to the face of Josh Griffin, and Griffin in trouble underneath. Jarid Bussemakers collapses off Josh Griffin as this fight goes the distance.
And the big swelling to the eye of Josh Griffin is more than likely perhaps a busted orbital bone. And Jarid Bussemakers is so exhausted from that last flurry. And again, the doctor in to take a look at the eye of Josh Griffin, and there's tons of swelling there, which normally it means that it's a busted orbital bone, but we're hoping for Josh Griffin's sake that it's not the case. But it was the big elbows from Jarid Bussemaker that caused all that damage, and an excellent fight by him. He was dominant when he got into the top position, and you can see the amount of damage that is done to the face of Josh Griffin. He is not a very pretty guy right now.